Hey everybody, it's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of the Rush Hour podcast, and I've got a treat for you guys today. Had a chat with my pal Rachel Juarez. She's a judge on Hot Bench, a TV show. She knows her thing. She's a big-time lawyer, and we talked the three different trials that are going on. We talked the Diddy trial, all of the updates, kind of from that 10,000-foot perspective. You know, if you haven't been following it, what's the trial really about? And then we also talked about Bachelor Clayton. We heard from Rachel about what she thinks of the perjury charges levied against Laura Owens. So if you're following that trial, you're going to need to hear what she has to say. Shocked as she had this very odd debate. It was a good one hosted by Reality Steve, where she wiped the floor of David Gingras, the attorney for Laura Owens, and clearly she was on the right side of that story. And then we've also got her thoughts on Justin Baldoni and whether or not she thinks that will actually go to trial. So a lot to get into. This is the cornucopia of content as far as pop culture trials are concerned. Here it is. Traveling the world from coast to coast, it's Rachel Juarez. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm good. How are you?
Good. So I'm excited to meet you in the flesh next week at Reality Steve's 50th birthday party.
Me too. I'm a Vegas person, so I'm so excited.
Are you a big gambler?
I was, and I played a lot of poker back in the day. So yes, I'm very excited. Big gambler.
Poker
I'm like
really,
I'm not a pool person. I'm like a down in the casino
Are
person.
you not coming to the private pool party?
I mean, maybe I'll come to the pool
Oh,
party.
you got to trust
but,
me. It is a fantastic event. You got to be there.
All right. Okay. You convinced me.
Poker is kind of like a game that's synonymous with like trial, right? Where you've got to read the other side and see what their next move is. What I wanted to talk about the Diddy trial and get a sort of 10,000-foot POV of what's going on. But first, I wanted to ask your thoughts on the Laura Owens getting charged with perjury amongst, I think, 7 other charges
Yes.
in the Clayton Echard case. How big of a deal was this?
I mean, it's huge, right? I think I've said pretty consistently that I thought she should be charged and I wanted to see her prosecuted, but that I genuinely didn't believe they would do it, and they did. So I was wrong, and I'm really glad because this is a really important sort of precedent setting case, not technical legal precedent, but for the public to see that you can't get away with stuff like this. You can't get away with abusing the court system and lying in court. And the big thing, and I think the reason it took so long is because they have that overlying fraud charge, which you have to kind of piece together. It's more than just the discrete perjury charges.
Yeah, look, I'm not one who takes too many victory laps in life because it's life is a long game. But apparently the morning at 5 a.m. when she was raided by police was the day my channel hit 100,000 subscribers. And, other people tell you these things, you don't know, and then people line up the dates, and she threatened to, bulldoze my property and run her horse around, and it's not too often you get such a poetic response to online bullying.
Yeah, and that they knew this was going on all along, and it turned out that Gingras's kind of slip about how they were issuing subpoenas was because he knew that was what was going on, and they were getting very close to charging her.
So what would a normal person do, and what do you think Laura's going to do when it comes to whether or not she takes a plea bargain or what?
It's such a good question. A normal person would 1000% take a plea bargain. She is a first-time offender, no criminal history. These are non-violent crimes. They have devastating effects and damage on their victims, but non-violent. Anybody else would be likely to be offered. I mean, most other people wouldn't be charged. That's just the truth. And, Laura will say that that's unfair and that she's being unfairly targeted because this has gained media attention. But I see it as the opposite. Using a prominent case in order to deter others from committing violence and to give sort of confidence in the public justice system is a completely appropriate use of the courts, right? One of the things they're supposed to do is deter people from committing crimes. That's why we punish them, one of the reasons. So I think using this as an example, because it's gained widespread attention, is good. But I think anybody else would be offered and would accept a plea deal with no jail time. It would be a couple of years on probation, suspended sentence, which means jail time would be ordered, but as long as they don't get in trouble or violate anything, that they don't have to go to jail. I don't know if she'll get that offer. If she does, I also don't know if she'll take it because I have not seen anything from her in the last, oh God, how long have I been following this case? Not as long as you guys have, but almost a year to suggest that she's capable of accepting responsibility for her actions.
Yeah. I had this job years ago where I was so bad at it and they finally fired me. They fired me and then I kind of felt good after. I was like, "Oh, I can quit the charade. I can just the shit for a little bit." And I wonder if she'll have that feeling of like, prison doesn't look too bad right now. I don't have to live this lie. But again, it to me, I think she's more likely to want to go to jail just so she has a story to tell when she comes out about how the
Yeah, I
system
don't know.
could be
I
un-
mean, jail is not a pretty place, and I doubt that she's ever been to one. Jail, prison, wherever she would end up, depending on the sentence. But and the other big thing to me, other than the jail time, which is a big one, is the fact that I think Rachel Mitchell's office will insist on an allocution in this case, which is that she comes before the court in making her, in putting forward her guilty plea and admits what she's done. And you have to allocute, which is not just say, yeah, I plead guilty. You have to say on January 24th, 1994 or whatever, I did this. And saying I didn't do any of this stuff is not acceptable. It's taking responsibility for your actions and owning what you've done.
But she's so manipulative. Can she like say that and then a week later go on Medium and say, "Jokesies, I had my fingers crossed. I didn't mean it."
She can, but if she does that and then she has a suspended sentence or something like that, they can make one of the conditions of her sentencing that she does not go on, public media and disavow responsibility for what she's already accepted responsibility for.
So
I don't know that they will because it's tough to restrict speech, but they can do it if she turns around and does that.
all right, I have a much younger brother, and when I was growing up, I was 18 years older than him. I could never play him in any sports because I would wipe the floor with him.
Yeah.
I was so much more dominant
Yeah.
than him, and I bring that up because your debate with David Gingras felt like that,
Aw.
where you wiped the floor with this man, this
Yeah.
bumbling buffoon who tries to defend Laura. Meanwhile, as we look in hindsight, he got completely owned by you, but then all of the reasons he was defending her have kind of been proven to be like, he almost like wanted to live in this, well, one in a million world.
Yes.
What were your thoughts? Did you feel vindicated by these charges after your debate with him or?
So I felt more vindicated because we were really on the civil side. I felt more vindicated by the motion for reconsideration being denied like 12 hours after Woodnick's office submitted their opposition because Gingras went on such a rant about, oh my gosh, they like my motion. They want to take it up. That's why they've asked for an opposition because it's so good. And I knew that wasn't the case, but I didn't know for sure. And so the fact that they just outright denied it once it was opposed, you know, because what he said was literally my arguments were so insane that that's the only reason he filed for reconsideration.
And
So now I get
he
to,
was just
yeah,
dunked on. I mean, immediately, like a 12-hour turnaround. That's like an immediate, like, open your email, denied.
they basically, I think, wanted to see, because so many people filed for reconsideration, if the fact that it was not written on a napkin by a pro per was enough for them to ask for an opposition. And then they saw, oh yeah, there's plenty of legal grounds to deny this, deny. It's very hard to win those. So that was more vindication. Of course, the criminal charges are a little bit of vindication because his argument is that she was pregnant because of these pictures that it now apparently we're going to find out were faked.
Boy, metadata, the old
Oh,
ability to look into laptops, it's really saving people's asses right now. So let's move off of Clayton and talk about
yeah,
the Diddy trial.
yeah.
I want to tell you my very like outside look at what's going on. This is a trial that's not about domestic violence, but that might play a part. It's a trial about racketeering in maybe sex trafficking. Is that what it is?
Yes, it's a racketeering trial. It's being brought under the RICO statute, which the best way to understand it is that's how you try the mob all together for everything they do, and it's why they created the statute, rather than trying this person for money laundering and this person for drug dealing and this person for assault. They bring it all in and they say it's a criminal organization.
And he's been accused of kind of being a mob boss in a way, with
Yeah.
the way he controls the industry. So, what do you think? There's people that say, "Oh, the prosecution's placed charges on him that are like they've outpunted their coverage." Do you think that the charges against him are something that he has a chance to get, wiggle out of?
I I think that it is very possible. Look, we're seeing the evidence come out right now, and we're only kind of, we're seeing it through live tweets, not, or live updates, not ourselves. But I do think there are a couple of issues with the RICO charges. Not that I know the prosecution can't prove them or I have reason to believe they can't, but that I'm concerned based on what we know so far could present a problem. And it's not that he didn't assault anybody or, uh, do anything that he's accused of doing, to these women and stuff. It's because there are technical requirements of a RICO charge that I'm a little concerned about, and I just leave it at that because it's very possible they may be able to prove that up very easily.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least, the damage to his reputation has been done. Cassie, it was revealed, I believe he paid her $20 million after
Yeah,
that abuse. And now I think she's receiving $10 million from the Intercontinental,
from the
who
hotel. Yeah.
must have helped cover up that insane video. I mean, just brutal video of that abuse. And I guess what it shows is like life is complicated, right? There's going to be text messages that come out that show that Cassie was in love with Diddy. And then there's also going to be abuse. And there's, men that are, the sex slaves they were accused of being, and what was consensual versus not. Now, this
Right.
trial is going to be something like 2 months long, right? Like, what's
Oh
the
yeah.
overall vision of what the prosecute, like, they've every witness isn't going to be a nail in the coffin, right? It's a
No.
big kind of story they're trying to paint.
Yeah, and because they have all these elements, I mean, a perfect example is Diddy had an assistant that testified, I think this morning. And they asked a lot of very mundane questions or mundane seeming questions about employment, how he took direction from Diddy, how he was compensated. And, he also saw some things, but he didn't see most of the bad stuff. But the reason they did that was to show that there's an organization separate from Diddy himself, because that's one of the most challenging things to show in a RICO case, except when you're dealing with the actual mob. That there has to be an actual organization separate and apart from the individuals acting together. And by starting to put those, building blocks in place, they're building up to something. So that guy saying, like, yes, I was directed to purchase things and I was reimbursed for them, kind of seems like, all right, we already know that he did much worse to Cassie. Why do we care about this? But that's why we care. So it's going to have to kind of be built step by step to show that there was an organization, and it doesn't have to be an illegal organization, but that there was an organization and that there were predicate acts committed.
Yeah, as like audience, we're listening to see like, oh, Kid Cudi got mentioned, or I think Usher was mentioned, and we're kind of listening for like things we know, but it seems as though it is a lot more of a marathon, really, to kind of put this all together. How much do you think the prosecution and or the defense, how much is them looking at the jury and trying to gauge what their vibes are, and are they adjusting it on the day to day about, is every day, like, it's the trial lasts all day long, are they then meeting up afterwards, putting together all the details for the next day, or is there
Oh,
like a
yes.
secondary set of legal experts that are working as they're in the trial process?
So both is the answer, right? There are attorneys working behind the scenes that are continuing to work on the next day and the next day. I'm sure there are attorneys behind the scenes working on their closing arguments right now, but yes, the attorneys are in trial, come back, and they typically, there's some sort of breakdown of what the jury is thinking. And 1000% they are looking at the jury and changing their, style on the fly, right? When I did these long trials in federal court, we would look at the jury and say, they're not buying this, they're not getting this, or they're sick of hearing about this doll, or they're sick of this, or everybody was writing when we talked about X. Like, let's explain that a little more and keep everybody engaged. but they're also kind of being prepared by the other folks to for the next day's, witness and testimony and things like that. So it's exhausting being
It
at
actually
trial.
reminds me of stand up because if the audience isn't buying your bit, you got to get out of the bit. You might have a 7 minute long bit, but the premise didn't hit. And you're like, I got, and then some other thing works that's like a terrible joke. And you're like, you tell the other comic, hey, they want the stupid stuff. Like you got to
Yes.
dumb it down.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. And especially for something like a RICO case, if they were to notice that, like, all the jurors seem confused when they're talking about assaulting Cassie, but they're very interested in the flights that one of the sex workers took across state lines. I have no reason to believe that would be the case, but they could easily pivot and say, all right, let's focus on those predicate acts and get rid of the assault stuff.
As someone who, I've only covered law, trials randomly here, and they're all different from family court to this. But when you look at Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively, the pretrial motions, I'm stressed out for the judge over everything they have to go through. This seems insane, all of the setting up of what's going to be allowed and what's not. Are you able to, how do you, as just like a spectator, but a professional spectator, absorb all of what's going on in trials like that?
I mean, it's very hard, but I think one thing that's important to understand, this is not unusual for a huge, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion trial. I mean, I did these trials as a young lawyer, and having motions every day was like old hat. Like, oh, of course, we've got 6 new motions today. Of course, there's, 100 more depositions to take. This is not, it is a little unusual that he's keeping them on such a tight time frame right from the outset, but not wildly unusual. And judges are allowed to do that. But, it's a little bit more condensed. And I actually don't think they'll necessarily stick to that trial date, but I don't know for sure. But having these motions, one right after the other, and all this stuff going on, very common in this type of litigation. We just don't see it very often.
So what are your thoughts on if it'll go to trial or not? I like to ask experts their percentage because I know it
Yeah.
changes. But as far as how far it's gone right now with the pretrial PR that everyone's slinging, you think this is going to go to trial?
I would put it maybe at 50-50, which says a lot because, I get different numbers depending on who you ask, but something like 90% of cases settle. I think it's 92 in federal court. I mean, it's a huge number. So having a 50% chance of going to trial is there. But they're both taking so many awful hits in the press right now that it's kind of like if you were going to settle, the time to do it was 4 months ago.
Well, I think Baldoni couldn't. I think what happened to him in December couldn't be any worse. So I don't see him settling because I think it's all or nothing. But I know you have to go in a minute. But the Blake and Ryan Reynolds both filed Rule 11 sanctions. When I looked into sanctions as like a nobody, they say that a lot of times sanctions are used as leverage to then get a settlement. But it seems as though why would they want to settle with him when they're both cross suing each other for so many millions of dollars? It doesn't seem like either a settlement would work for either side.
Do you think that definitely Lively would settle for nothing, for no money right now? Maybe she's trying to, I'll take a look at the Rule 11 motions. I'll tell you my thoughts, but maybe she's hoping that if Brian Friedman personally is on the hook, or if he has something to lose, that it'll change the landscape. I don't know.
So it's almost like trying to put pressure on the representatives.
Yeah, but I really don't. I think in this case, I don't really think that's what it is. I think it's more press nonsense, just like the letters that were written, right? When the first letter came out, whoever asked me about it first, I said, that is a totally improper letter to file in federal court. There's no purpose for it. They wrote that literally as a press statement, but said, Dear Judge Lyman, and then disseminated it.
Well, what you're noticing is the same thing Laura Owens was doing, which is
Yeah.
for search engine optimization. If you can get the words that are being used against you in other articles and insert them into your articles, then that'll push away the bad stuff. It's a wild time to be alive. I'll tell you that.
It really is, and I would love to see this case go to trial. We won't actually get to see it, but I think this will be a very unique look into these like massive trials that are going on, like Google versus Samsung, things like that. It'll be really fascinating to see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, fascinating to chat with you, and I look forward to seeing you next week at the pool for a reality
Yay!
series party.
All right, I'll come to the pool. I'll take like a 10-minute break and come see the pool.
Nice. All right, and then
Um,
we hope you'll win a lot of money. You'll have to meet my son. He's good luck. He'll be there with us.
oh yes, babies are good luck. But he's one now, isn't he?
He's won. So maybe the luck's
Yeah.
running dry with him. I don't know. But anyhow,
No.
your show Hot Bench is out there, and I know you're flying across the
Check
country.
your local listings. Yep, we're going back and forth. We're filming in Connecticut now, so I'm about to go back on set.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah.
keep crushing it with that. I'll post a link to your Instagram below, and
Awesome.
yeah, come back anytime.
Anytime. And we'll talk soon, and I'll see you soon next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
All right, take care.